Hi, this is Kristen, and this is Human Anatomy and Physiology, Biology 231. We're reading the OER free Pressbooks online book, and we left off in section 1.1 talking about three things that make us alive. I just wanted to briefly review the characteristics of life. So anything that it's alive is going to have at least 10 characteristics. One of them is responsiveness. So organisms, humans, have the ability to sense and to monitor and respond to changes in its external environment, so outside the body, but also its internal environment, so it can respond to anything that changes inside the body. So for example, if your body responds to something outside the body, if you touch something hot, you immediately pull your hand away from the stove or away from the source of heat. Another example where your body responds to changes inside the body might be if your core body temperature increases above normal and you respond by perspiring in order to cool yourself. So, two examples of responsiveness. A second characteristic of life is conductivity. Living cells in the body have the ability to transmit an electrochemical disturbance from one point to another. So, in other words, we do this with our nerve cells. Our neurons conduct an electrochemical impulse from, for example, the central nervous system to our skeletal muscles, which enable us to move. A third major characteristic of life is growth. And I'm sure you know what growth is. It's just an organized increase in size and in the number of cells. And of course, we all know that as children and adolescents, our bones and muscles grow longer and thicker, and our bones, while they grow, maintain a pretty consistent proportion. The fourth major characteristic of life is respiration. So respiration refers to the exchange of respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, and we exchange these respiratory gases between our lungs and the external environment. Examples: inhalation and exhalation are both a part of respiration. The fifth major characteristic of life is digestion. And digestion is the process where food is broken down into simpler substances that we then use as energy in the cells. So, for example, we eat food that provides our body with the energy it needs to function. The sixth major characteristic of life is absorption. And absorption is just the movement of molecules through a membrane and into body fluids that then transport them into the cell to be used. So the types of molecules that are moved with absorption could be gases, they could be nutrients, and it's pretty typical for the body to be made up of membranes through which these molecules move. Typically, we move these things into the cell, for example. So one example of absorption would be the hormone called insulin. It helps the body absorb glucose into the cell, and then the cell uses that glucose for energy. The second example could be oxygen. Our lungs absorb oxygen into the blood so that the oxygen can then be transported to cells. So again, oxygen is absorbed from the lungs into the blood so it can be transported to cells and then used. Secretion is just the production and release of substances from cells into bodily fluids, usually blood. And the substances can be used for a variety of different functions. So for example, the beta cells of the pancreas secrete a hormone called insulin into the blood. Insulin leads to a decrease in blood sugar levels. So we typically think of a cell secreting a substance into bodily fluids, typically blood. That's secretion. Now, excretion is a little different than secretion because instead of secreting a substance into blood, we actually remove waste from the body. That's excretion. One example might be we excrete urine through the urethra to the outside of our body. Another example, we excrete feces through the anus. Or number 3 example, we excrete carbon dioxide through the mouth and nose into the outside environment. Carbon dioxide is a waste product. The 9th major characteristic of life is movement or circulation. Now the movement can be moving our body, but it can also be movement of substances throughout the body, which would be circulation. So the body moves bodily fluids through tubular conduits that move the substance throughout the body in a cycle. So for example, lymph circulates throughout the lymphatic vessels, and blood circulates throughout the body from the heart to the arteries and then to the capillaries and to the veins and back to the heart again. The 10th major characteristic of life is reproduction, and an example would be the birth of an infant. Reproduction is the formation of a new individual offspring, and that's what happens when we become parents. There's a picture of a marathon runners here, and of course they do exhibit characteristics of life. They respond, and they respond by sweating as they're moving. They increase the sweat production in response to a rising internal body temperature as a result of running. Just one example. Okay, section 1.2. Section 1.2 is about the structural organization of the human body. And we think of these different levels of organization based on how complex they are. We start off with the simplest level and we move to the most complex. So if we start off at the chemical level, the chemical level is the very simplest level. It includes atoms, elements, compounds, molecules. So all matter is composed of units called atoms, which are comprised of subatomic particles like protons with a positive charge, electrons with a negative charge, and neutrons, which are neutrally charged. They have no charge. And atoms are the smallest unit of an element. An example might be hydrogen. Hydrogen has 1 proton, 1 electron, and no neutrons. An element is also part of the chemical level, the simplest level. A substance that's made up of the same kind of atoms would be an element. An element is pure. It can't be broken down any further through normal means. It is a unique substance that makes up all the matter in the universe, and it does not typically exist alone in its pure state. It doesn't typically exist freely. Examples could be hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. Now, compounds are when 2 or more different elements are joined together, and that's usually the case. We're usually dealing with compounds. The different elements are joined together by a chemical bond, and a compound is just a type of molecule. An example of a compound could be water, like H2O, table salt, which is sodium chloride, carbon dioxide gas, which is carbon and 2 oxygens, calcium oxide, which is calcium and oxygen joined together, and methane gas, which is a carbon joined to 4 hydrogen atoms. Molecules are 2 or more atoms. They could be the same or different, and they're combined by a molecular bond. Molecules are basically the chemical building blocks of all living things, and they're the smallest unit of a compound. So you can have examples like water, H2O, or you could have an example like hydrogen gas, which is 2 H's. So typically, we think of the chemical level as dealing with molecules, the simplest level. Now, the second major level of organization is the cellular level. And of course, cells contain chemicals. So this is a slightly more complex level. It includes the chemical level, and it includes things like organelles and the cell itself. Organelles are the tiny functioning units within the cell, things like the nucleus and mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum. And then the cell itself is part of the cellular level. It's the smallest independently functioning unit of an organism. It's made up of a cell membrane, which separates the inside of the cell from the outside. It's made up of the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm includes the cytosol, which is the liquid component of the cell's interior. The cytoplasm includes inclusions, little inclusions of nutrients, for example. The cytoplasm includes organelles. Examples of cells: you could have a nerve cell, a neuron. You could have a muscle fiber, which is a skeletal muscle cell, an osteocyte, like a mature bone cell, or an adipocyte, which is a fat cell. What's interesting is all of these cells have a different structure and therefore a different function. Now, the third major level is the tissue level, and it is even more complex. It contains both the chemical level and the cellular level. And a tissue is basically a group of many similar cells that work together to perform one or more specific functions. Tissues typically consist of different types of cells, though. Examples might be epithelial tissue or connective tissue, or muscle tissue or nervous tissue. The fourth major level of organization is the organ level, which is even more complex. The organ level contains the chemical level, the cellular level, and the tissue level. And we will be examining the human body at all of these levels. An organ is an anatomically distinct structure that's comprised of two or more tissue types that performs one or more specific functions. An example of an organ would be a bone. A bone is made up of different types of tissues. It's made up of connective tissue and epithelial tissue in the blood vessels inside the bone, and nervous tissue in the nerves inside the bone. Another example could be a blood vessel. A blood vessel is an organ, and it's made up of epithelial tissue and connective tissue. Another example of an organ is a skeletal muscle, and it's comprised of mostly muscle tissue, but also connective tissue and nervous tissue, because we have nerves in our muscles. The fifth major level of organization of the human body is the organ system level. It's even more complex, and it includes the chemical level, the cellular level, the tissue level, and the organ level. Our textbook is divided by chapter according to organ systems. So we'll start with the integumentary system, and then we'll move to the skeletal system, and so forth. So an organ system is just a group of organs that work together to perform major functions that maintain the health or the homeostasis of the body. Now, there are basically 11 different organ systems, and you should have a pretty good idea of their basic functions. The integumentary system includes the skin, hair, nails, and it basically separates the outside of the body from the inside of the body. It stabilizes our internal fluid volume, and it houses all sorts of sensory receptors. The skeletal system consists of our bones. It supports and protects our internal organs. It supports our body. It works with the skeletal muscles to allow us to move, and it stores minerals like calcium and phosphate. The muscular system includes skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles obviously work with the bones to produce movement, but also the skeletal muscles provide heat. The nervous system. The nervous system includes nerves, the brain, supporting cells that support the nerves. Its functions are basically that it detects and processes sensory information. It regulates body processes. It activates effectors that cause body responses. So, for example, it can cause us to jump out of the way of a moving vehicle. It regulates the homeostasis of the body. It basically keeps us healthy. The endocrine system. The endocrine system includes glands that secrete hormones, and the glands are ductless. They don't have a duct. They just release their product into the blood. The functions of the endocrine system are that they also regulate homeostasis, much like the nervous system. They just take a little longer to cause a response. They secrete hormones into the blood and the lymph, and then those hormones, which are little chemical messengers, target an effector cell to cause a response. So, for example, the pituitary gland could secrete a hormone that would go act on another organ and cause that organ to cause a response. The cardiovascular system includes the blood vessels in the heart. The heart's the pump that moves the blood throughout the body. And the major functions are that it delivers oxygen, hormones, nutrients to cells, and then it also removes waste from the cells. It removes CO2, for example. And the cardiovascular system helps to equalize body temperature throughout the body. The lymphatic system, it includes lymph nodes, various organs, and lymphatic vessels. Its major function is that it returns fluid to the blood because fluid leaks out of the blood into the tissues. And then the lymphatic system returns the fluid to the blood and also helps to defend against disease-causing agents called pathogens. Now, the respiratory system consists of our lungs and our airways, and it maintains stable level of oxygen and carbon dioxide within the body. And that's important. Carbon dioxide affects blood pH. We need oxygen to make sure the cells continue living. The respiratory system delivers oxygen to the blood, and it removes carbon dioxide from the body. It also even provides a means of vocal communication. We have to push air out of our lungs to be able to speak. The ninth major organ system would be the digestive system. The digestive system functions to process our food, and then we use that food for energy. The digestive system maintains a pretty constant nutrient level in the body, and it removes undigested food waste from the body. The urinary system consists of our urinary bladder, urethra, ureter, kidneys. It's important because it controls water and electrolyte balance in the body. Electrolytes are basically ions or little charged atoms. And we have to make sure we maintain the proper balance of water and electrolytes. The urinary system also removes waste from the blood, and it excretes waste from the body. It involves the renal system, which is our kidneys. The reproductive systems basically function to produce sex hormones and gametes, such as the sperm or eggs. And the reproductive system passes our genetic code to our offspring. The male reproductive system, it functions to deliver the sperm to the female reproductive tract. It also produces testosterone in sperm. And the female reproductive system, it produces estrogens and progesterone, which are hormones. It also produces ova, or eggs. and it supports the developing offspring, or conceptus, until birth. Also, the female reproductive system produces milk for the infant to nourish it. Now, the sixth, we've talked about the organ system level, but the sixth major organizational level is the organism level. This is the most complex level. It contains every other level of organization. It includes the chemical level, the cellular level, the tissue level, the organ level, and the organ system level. The organism is the most complex level of organization. It is the living being, the living human, and all of the different levels have to work together to maintain life. And I'm going to go ahead and stop there for now. We'll talk about homeostasis in another video.